Good morning, everybody. I'm Chloe. I'm the festival programmer here, and welcome to the third day of the BFI Future Film Festival. This morning's event is one of my personal favourites in the whole programme. I know that I'm not meant to have favourites, but you do. You're only human. Which is our Director Masterclass with Athina Tsangari. You will have noticed that this year we've been able to bring a few more international speakers to the festival. And when we first discussed this, Athina was top of my list to bring to the festival to talk to you guys about her work. So I'm not going to say much at the top. I'm going to hand over to Kieran Corliss, who's going to be hosting today's session. And I hope you guys enjoy.
Okay, thank you all for coming. Welcome to the BFI Future Film Festival. Welcome to Athina, who's just flown in from Athens this morning and is very under the weather, I'm afraid. So thank you very much for coming out and doing this when you're feeling so bad. The format today is basically we've got an hour and a half. Athina and I will talk for about an hour, and the plan is to show about 10 clips, although we may reduce that. We'll see how we get on with timings. We're a little bit unsure about whether we can manage to show all 10. And then there'll be about half an hour for you to ask us some questions as well. So I'll just basically very quickly sort of introduce Athina. She was born and raised in Greece, left Greece to go and study in the US, in Texas. She actually acted in a Richard Linklater film, which I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit more about later. Her first short film is called Fit and was made in 1993. Her first feature, The Slow Business of Going, was released in 2001. Took a long time to make. Again, I think that's something that we want to explore. And then, once that film had been released, she returned to Greece and was invited to do the Olympic opening ceremony in 2004. And quite an amazing accolade for a person who only has one feature under their belt. So again, we'll be interested to find out how that came about. And in 2008, also did the opening of the Acropolis Museum. I should say that this is like image projection. By this stage, Athina was working in image projection as well as sort of directing films. As well as directing films, Athina is also a producer. And that career sort of kick-started around about 2005 with Yorgos Lanthimos's Kineta. And then she also went on to produce the same with the same director, Dogtooth in 2009 and Alps in 2011, and there are lots of other films that she's produced too. Made her second feature, Attenberg, in Greece in 2010. This, I think, was fair to say, this is the film that really made an international name. It was released internationally. It was certainly released in the UK and is available on DVD here, and was much lauded. Thereafter, in 2012, Athina directed a mid-length film called Capsule, which, am I right in thinking that was a commission?
Yeah.
And it's in French and was shot in France as well, or not?
No, it was shot in Greece.
Yeah. Shot in Greece, but they speak French. French money, and yeah, well, we'll talk about that later. Her most recent film is Chevalier, made in 2015, again internationally distributed, and very much a film that cemented her reputation as one of the most distinctive voices in world cinema. She has her own independent production company, and as well as being a director, producer, screenwriter, actor, and projection artist, Athina is also a programmer. I think I'm right in saying you set up a festival in America once upon a time, and she describes herself as a voracious cinephile. Okay, so before we get to the first clip from your first short film, my first 2 or 3 questions that kind of lumped together would be, briefly, why did you leave Greece and go to the States? And how did you become a director? And why did you become a director? Why did you want to become a director?
I had not started as a film person at all. My undergraduate studies were in philosophy and theater and comparative literature. And I knew that I was probably going to do something in theater. But most probably would be theory, writing. Also, I grew up, I came of age in the 80s, and it was not really a thing that girls would do in Greece, become directors, theater or film directors. There was one director, a female director, who was a huge inspiration. Her name is Antoinette Angelidi, and she had made this film called Topos, which I saw when I was 14, and I thought, and it's very much in love with space and amazing imagery. Not really a linear film. So that was something that was stuck in my head. And then when I went to America to do my master's on performance studies, it was called, something between ethnography, visual anthropology, theater, and semiotics, a very interdisciplinary, which I think marked the way I make films. And then I met Rick Linklater just completely by chance when I got a grant because I couldn't really afford studying in America. So the Fulbright Foundation sent me to Austin, Texas, and I thought I was gonna die. What the fuck am I doing here? I was supposed to go to New York. The only thing I wanted growing up was going to New York. That's all. That was like my single. It just so happened that I met Rick as he was auditioning for Slacker, and I became kind of like the PA slash third AD slash caterer. It's the kind of thing that it was really inspiring to see that you can make a film like that with your friends, with nothing, but with a really great vision behind it, with borrowed equipment and with short ends from ads. So that that really gave me. I knew I got the bug basically, and then after I finished with my performance studies, I went to Texas and I started a program on directing and producing, which I should say that in the States, when you go to film school, most of the times you do both. You do everything.
Yeah.
You have to go through sound, and you have to shoot a movie, and you have to produce, you have to make a budget, and which I think is important behind the vision of, and for the survival of independent film.
Absolutely. So that's when you made the first short, Fit?
Fit, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to see the first 3 minutes, I think, of Fit. If you could run the clip, please.
Lizzie is trying to fit her sock on her foot. Although last night, before she went to sleep, both of her socks were size 6, today, Monday, April 2nd, the left sock seems to be at least 3 sizes smaller than the right. She looks puzzled at her foot, which patiently waits to be dressed.
So, do you think it's how's it feel seeing that again now today?
I actually hadn't seen it in a long time until showing it to my students 2 years ago at Harvard, and you know, it's a film that I made. It's very important, I think, when you have to make a film, and you know you have to make a film, it has to come out of you to figure out how to say what you might know or you might not know, and figure out the equivalent of it in film. So this is called Fit, and the only thing she says in the end is, I can't quite fit things inside other things, which is something that has been my preoccupation and my existential state, you know, ever since. So it was, I guess, being suddenly in the midst of a film school in Austin, Texas, and my whole preoccupation of what it is to be a nomad and not quite belonging, you know, questions of belonging is something that started with this film, and I keep making the same film ever since.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to look back on it now, because it does have it seems to me there's sort of a collision of different elements in there, you know, and it's got a very complex tone. It's very hard to sort of fix it, you know, and to sort of say exactly what it is. And I feel that, you know, it's a hybrid somehow, and that seems to continue throughout your work aesthetically. Okay, we won't linger too long on that because we have got to race through lots of stuff. Okay, so the next, so then you made a feature. But it took you a long time. How long did it take you to make that first feature?
Well, I made this in my first year, and then The Slow Beach of Going started as a short for my second year, for my sophomore year, and then it kind of blew up. So it took 5 years, I guess, or no, more. It premiered in 2000 in Thessaloniki. So it took, I guess 5 years.
And it's shot in lots of different cities. It's a very episodic film, isn't it? And it's also, again, very hybrid. It has lots of different elements, formal elements. I mean, it seems to, you know, there's kind of screwball elements, and there's kind of just what you might call quite naturalist drama elements.
It was my school.
Yeah.
I think I made the decision that I was just going to exploit and discover what it is to be a film student all the way, but by being very, you know, sort of like putting it on the screen. So I had a very loyal team, and at that point I had activated my producer's brain, so I would get lots of donations from hotels and from airlines. So we would just fly to Havana, and then we would fly to the Czech, and then, you know, anywhere where any airline would take us, basically. And we're 5 of us. We're shooting on film. It's a bit of the archaeology of the medium, actually, because this was the historic transition time between film to, you know, through analog video. You know, there is some stuff that was actually shot on high 8, 3/4 inch, beta, Super 8. The first generation of digital, mini TV, and then the first HD digital. Oh, wow.
Exciting.
And then the whole thing was blown up to 35.
Yeah.
And in fact, because it was such a hybrid and completely out of control hybrid, the lab, it's a historic lab in New York called Duart, that had done all my masters, you know, everyone I loved. So I went to them, and I could not afford them, of course not. So they said, because you have done all this, we're going to use you as a test.
The test case, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
To see how
Yeah.
all of these different media
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
conformed.
Fantastic.
And then, so I didn't actually have to pay.
So it's a
much.
historic film, in fact. Yeah. Yeah.
For that,
Yeah,
yes.
incredible.
For all sorts of, you know, it was like a film that, you know, the turn of the millennium was happening.
Mm.
So I really wanted to talk about that, you know, how it felt.
Mm-hmm.
And not because I'm very much about tactility, so it was very much about the human body also as the medium, as the material of.
We certainly
film.
see, yeah, and we definitely see that. Well, it's throughout the film, but we certainly see that in the clip. Let's see the clip now. We can talk a little bit more about that one. Could you run the second clip, please?
Hello? Hello?
Ow.
All right?
Fine. We met?
In the elevator.
Right.
Terrifying me, elevators.
Me too. Would have stopped to chat, but
Right. You seemed busy.
today is my big day. No fear all day. I woke up so audaciously. I knew. Today.
What about heights? Terrify you?
Bring 'em on.
Traffic? Cancer? Your dark side? Embarrassment?
Nothing.
Me? What the?
Great. And the film, I mean, maybe, Athina, if you could just tell us what the film is about, briefly.
Yeah, Petra Going is an agent who works for the Global Nomad Project. So she goes around. She lives only in hotels, and she meets people. She has experiences, and then she goes back to the headquarters and downloads her memories for the use of people who basically don't like to travel, or they don't like to see new things. And it's not just memories, it's also smells, sounds. So she's a synesthetic machine. And it was, this is what I want to say, I guess, for my turn of the millennium, because, it must be very strange for all of you, but when I started, the internet did not exist. So it was, as the internet was coming into our lives, and it was becoming, all this virtuality in the way we communicated. And before Facebook, I sort of got the idea of this network of nomads who basically just travel around, and they transmit, they're transmitters, which is what we all are right now, more than tactile beings.
And we see very much in this clip the influence of silent cinema, slapstick, but unfortunately there's not time to show other clips from the film because there's stuff from later on which is so completely different in style. It is a very, very hybrid film, isn't it? It's kind of
because as I said, it was a autobiographical film school. Where literally the first thing I shot, which was the most awkward, that was the second. And then we kept shooting every time we get a little bit of money, and I would. The film was finished after actually I graduated. This was my graduation film, but we still had 1 year where I got some grants to finish it. So it's actually really watching yourself growing as a filmmaker. So the first 5 years afterwards, I couldn't really watch it. I felt so embarrassed.
It's, we said earlier, it seems like a film it feels like very much of this moment, actually. It deserves a revival. I'm not sure where people could even see this film now. I only saw it first time researching this meeting today. It's a shame that it's kind of a bit lost. Anyway, let's move on. So, you'd made one feature, you went back to Greece, and they invited you to do the Olympic opening ceremony in 2004.
No, but I should say that I was not alone in that.
No.
It was there was the artistic director Dimitris Papaioannou who invited me to basically be in charge of all the visual projections.
So you were doing a lot of visual projection at this point, and you'd
No.
No.
I had been doing some, because I was running the Cinemathex Film Festival in Austin. I was doing lots of projectionist work.
Okay, right. Yeah.
And also some installations with chain projections, but no, that was not my thing.
Yeah.
But I think because there was all this, it was a very multimedia film, and it was, it was moving constantly from like really very fragile images to some, kind of quite big tableaus. He thought that he wanted something like that. In the biggest spectacle in the world, he wanted something that was made almost homemade.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what I did. So I brought my team from Austin, my classmates basically, who had just graduated. We had graduated a year before. And we set up, and I said, I would love to do it, but I want to produce that myself.
Yeah.
So that I'm in charge of the aesthetics and where how we spend the budget. So we actually set up a little shop within the Olympics Corporation, and we created this spectacle. But I have to say that seeing it, it reminds me a lot of the stuff we did for the Slow Beers of Going. And again, it was like the same team.
Yeah.
And I'm still working with the same team. So we started from when we were in our mid-20s, and we developed all this language, which was also very much, and that's why it's very important to be working with people at least to a certain extent, even if it's bigger productions, because that was, you know, a multi-million euro production. But I knew that I was safe because I had my like 4 people.
We should take a look at it. Do you think it makes sense to show? Because later, a few years later, you also did the projections on for the opening of the Acropolis Museum as well.
Mm-hmm.
Should we run those 2 clips together? So
Yeah.
we'll show the Olympics one, and then the one after that, which is the Acropolis, if that's okay.
Greetings from the International Space Station. I'm Commander Gennady Patov, along with my flight engineer Athina.
Right. Okay, so now we come to Attenberg, I guess. Although, before that, I think I'm right in saying you produced Yorgos's first film, yeah? Kineta, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe, perhaps there's not so much time. Yeah, no, let's forget it. Because it's a shame we can't talk about so much about that. Let's talk about Attenberg, sorry. Where did the idea come from? I mean, where do your ideas come from generally? I mean, are they sort of, is it something that just visual, is it an image or is it, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And then how does it develop from there? I mean, what's the process
It starts
after
as
that?
an image.
Right.
So that was the image of two girls kissing in front of a white wall. And then that place became, although I did not write it for that, it became the place where I spent the first 6 years of my life, which was a company town. And so it starts as an image, and then I ask lots of questions to that image. That image becomes my best friend for a while, and then it becomes a story, but not necessarily with beginning, a middle, and end. That's something that really happens when I start rehearsing.
Do you want to talk about your rehearsal process? Because I know that it's quite, well, both casting and rehearsal, in your case, are both quite protracted. So could you talk a little bit about that and why that is so, and kind of...
Yeah, and I should say that this is a method, for example, for the Acropolis film, it was, it was going to be projections, but at the same time I had to cast all these characters. So we actually spent, it was great because it hadn't opened yet, and they were unpacking all these amazing boxes with all these treasures that were coming down from the temple.
Wow.
It was really, and we're spending our nights there, sleeping with them.
Must have been magical.
So it was really like casting those characters for this film, because there were like millions, and most of these things are like that small.
Oh, really?
So casting.
Yeah.
Casting your characters in your head and then through your actors. I think it's. I think that's why I make films. You've got to love people to do that. You've got to want to spend all sorts of time asking questions and make sure that you're truthful to your characters' questions. So I write the script, or I co-write it, like with Chevalier, or with my next one, White Knuckles. And then I've been lucky because I've been making films in a country where actors are extremely generous with their time. And also I make films with very little money, so I don't really, and I'm my own producer, so I don't have to hear things like we don't have the budget to rehearse. So I try to make time. This might be the problem for my next film, so I'll see how I will handle that. But to be able to spend time working with the cast, like Attenberg, the entire cast, we spent about 2 months in a little studio. Ariane was not speaking Greek, so it was also her way of being Marina as someone who didn't belong in her environment and also didn't belong in the language that she was speaking. So it was actually perfect. And then we made the film.
Yes, well, so let's show the first clip, please. Yeah.
Παντρευτείς ποτέ?
Δεν νομίζω.
Δεν σ' αρέσουν οι άντρες?
Όχι ιδιαίτερα.
Δεν έχεις και άδικο.
Ούτε σε να σ' αρέσουν.
Προτιμώ τις γυναίκες.
Κι εγώ. Όχι έτσι όπως εσύ. Δεν τις ποθώ. Δεν έχω ποθήσει ποτέ. Δεν το έχω κάνει ποτέ με κανέναν. Συχαίνομαι. Το βρίσκω αειδιαστικό. Ένα πράγμα μέσα μου να κινείται μπρος πίσω σαν πιστόνι και να με πνίγει. Δεν μπορώ να φαντάζομαι ότι έχεις και εσύ ένα από αυτά.
Εγώ δεν έχω από τέτοια. Ποτέ δεν είχα.
Είσαι όντως εξωγήινος. Όπως υποπτευόμουν.
Ανιόρχης.
Ανάρχας.
Ανάρχορχης.
Αραχνόρχης.
Κουρτινόρχης.
Πυθικόρχης.
Μπαλονόρχης.
Εσύ έχεις ποθήσει ποτέ μετά τη μαμά?
Ναι.
Το έχεις κάνει?
Ποιο?
Ξέρεις. Αυτό. Το πιστόνι.
Ναι.
Με απογοητεύεις.
Τι συμπόνια?
Μισώ τη συμπόνια.
Θέλω να αρχίσεις να ζεις με τους άλλους.
Δεν με μαθες να ζω έτσι. Γιατί μου το ζητάς?
Okay, so I think this is a good moment to talk about naturalism. And I know you've talked about almost like an aversion to naturalism sometimes, or a kind of, or being rescued from naturalism. But it's interesting here, and I mean, we've got a combination of 3 scenes here, and obviously in 2 we're seeing something which is very much more about kind of performance, like almost like the first scene, performance art, almost choreography, and then, but sandwiched in the middle is this scene which is actually quite naturalistic, in which more conventional, in which we're learning an awful lot about the characters and their relationship, which is a very unusual relationship, admittedly. But so maybe just could you just talk a little bit about that, like sort of realism, naturalism, and if you do have a kind of an aversion to it.
I mean, right. You know, it changes with every film, but I guess because my roots are so much in theater, you know, very, very formal narratives and very archetypal. So, and, you know, my 2 biggest influences, Greek tragedy and Beckett.
Beckett, yeah.
So it's you know, it's maybe it's not so much a dilemma. Maybe it shouldn't be so much a dilemma.
Absolutely.
I think it's a guilt that we're carrying over through this millennium. Something that my predecessors and my masters, you know, we're talking a bit about Buñuel before. You know, did he ever have any dilemma between surrealism, naturalism? You know, he did his own kind of naturalism.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think this kind of guilt is something that has been carried over after these two disastrous almost decades of cinema, the 80s and the 90s. You know, where basically, you know, we were asked to choose. You know, we were in the film schools and we were asked to choose. And I think through all of my work as a filmmaker, you know, director, producer, curator, teacher, whatever I can to be part of cinema, which I completely disagree that it should be just being a director. I think it's you know, it's a false dilemma. And I think I've been trying to go against that. So, you know, the Slow Bees of Going was really much preoccupied with that. You know, it's very an awkward little student epic, but at the same time, I think I had started investigating what it means to, you know, to deliver a truth of the character, but without emoting, you know, without sentimentalizing your characters. And you know, that started getting better and better by the last episode of Slow Bees, and then I stopped for a while. And it's something also, you know, I've been thinking, why did I stop for so long to actually want to direct a film, to write and direct, and it just happened. You know, I think this whole thing also, this whole pressure, you know, I was producing films, you know, by an amazing filmmaker, and I was doing these projections that meant a lot in terms of my own relationship as someone who had been in exile, going back to Greece and understanding what my country was before I actually did Attenborough, which was about not belonging in my country, not belonging in my own skin. You know, so there's, I really, my favorite thing behind cinema is the process. And it's, I know that everyone hates it because it takes so long, and sometimes I want to kill myself and, you know, shoot myself. You know, you become, because it's a complex work. You know, it's not like writing or painting. You know, you require an organism around you or an army. Anyway.
Yes, I'm looking at the time. What I suggest is we skip, because there was a second clip from Attenborough, so I suggest we skip that and move on to the first clip from your most recent feature, Chevalier, which is set on a boat, and it's a group of men. It's men only in this film, and it's a group of men who are very much in competition with each other, to find out who is the best in general. So could we run the first clip from Chevalier, please? Oh no, sorry, we missed one. Capsule.
It might be interesting to show clicking the caption together with this, because they got it totally sequel.
Έλα μαζί.
Προσοχή παρακαλώ. Φροντίζουμε να βγάζουμε πάντα τα παπούτσια μας πριν εισέλθουμε στους εξωτερικούς χώρους του σκάφους. Ευχαριστώ.
Θες να το κάνει εγώ? Να σου πω. Είναι Αθήνα 40, πώς τη θέλει. Κάνεις κάτι ιδιαίτερο. Τα γνωστά. Μάτι, λεμόνι. Αυτοί που πιάσαμε δεν ήταν πολύ γεμάτοι. Ξέρεις, οι Αθηνοί γεμίζουν φούλα αυγά με την παρσέλινα. Το ξέρω. Οι κολοκτύπες είναι γνώστοι μέσα. Και έχουν πλάκα. Δηλαδή? Όταν τις πιάνεις. Την ουρά τους και χτυπάνε. Κλαπ, 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 κλαπ. Και κάστορες κάνουν έτσι. Κάνεις κάστορες? Όχι. Καλαμάρια πιάνεις? Καλαμάρια δεν πιάνω, αλλά τα τρώω, μου αρέσουν πολύ. Ξέρεις το μυστικό για να τηγανιστούν σωστά τα καλαμάρια? Όχι. Αυτά στα γκέις τελείως, τα παίρνεις, αυτά πλύνεις πρώτα πολύ καλά τα καλαμάρια. Το μυστικό είναι να τους αφαιρέσεις εντελώς στο νερό, πρέπει να είναι τελείως τραγκισμένα. Με χαρτοπετσέτες. Με χαρτοπετσέτες, με ροδοκουζίνας, με πανιά. Τα παίρνεις και τα βάζεις μέσα σε μια σακούλα γεμάτη αλεύρι. Τα ανακατεύεις καλά-καλά και δεν γεμίζεις κουζίνα με αλεύρι. Δεν τα τηγανίζω στην κουζίνα. Φωνάζει η γυναίκα μου. Και πού τα τηγανίζεις? Στον κήπο, με το καζάκι. Εσύ μαγειρεύεις? Όχι ιδιαίτερα. Αλλά φτιάχνω μια σαλάτα. Με αχλάδια τυλιγμένα σε προσούτο και ρόκα. Τι λες? Ναι. Κόβω τα αχλάδια σε μακρόστενες φέτες, τα ψήνω, μετά τα τυλίγω με προσούτο σφιχτά, έχω απλώσει και στο πιάτο προσούτο, βάζω τα ρολάκια πάνω και στο τέλος στη μέση τη ρόκα. Θα μπορείς να βάλεις τη ρόκα και μέσα στο ρολάκι, σωστά? Μπορείς. Έχεις απόλυτη ελευθερία. Και σαν dressing χρησιμοποιώ μπαλσάμικο καραμελωμένο. Πώς το καραμελώνεις? Στους 120 βαθμούς. Ομό ψάρι τρως? Ομό, πολύ. Ο Νικολάου φαντάζομαι όχι. Ο Νικολάου, να σου πω την αλήθεια, δεν ξέρω. Πανερά τουλάχιστον όχι. Δεν ξέρω, μπορεί να κρύβεται και στο μπάνιο και να τρώει καρπάτσιο Σολομού. Δεν ξέρω. Είστε κανένα συνεργάτες? 11. Ιδιαίτερος άνθρωπος ο Νικολάου, να μου λες, πολύ. Εσύ πόσα χρόνια έτσι με τον γιατρό στην κλινική? 4. Α. Και ποιον λες να αφήσει το αστές του? Γιατί συνταξιοδοτείται φέτος από εκεί. Αυτό πρέπει να το ρωτήσεις στον ίδιο. Ναι. Αυτό είναι σημαντική απόφαση. Ο γιατρός είναι πολύ έξυπνος άνθρωπος. Είμαι σίγουρος ότι θα επιλέξει το πιο κατάλληλο. Τα παιδιά σου πόσο είναι? Τα παιδιά μου. Η κόρη μου είναι 16 και ο γιος μου είναι 12. Θα έκανα μικρός. Όχι και τόσο. Πόσο είσαι? 45, δεν φαίνεται, εντάξει. Δεν θα ήθελες να έχεις αλυτέψει λίγο παραπάνω? Καθόλου.
Okay. I'm just going to find out. Chloe, is Chloe here? Yeah, have we got till about 12:40 because we started at 11:10? Sorry? Is that okay, yeah? Okay, good. Should we show a clip from Capsule as well? Yeah, we actually, Athina made a film just before this. It's like a mid-length film called Capsule, which is whereas this film is all men. This one is again a very enclosed space, a kind of strange institution, almost like a kind of school. This one is all female, kind of very much in a kind of almost sci-fi sort of genre. We can talk about that in a minute. But if you could please show the clip prior to that one from Capsule, thanks.
Bienvenue. Bienvenue.
Intense. Could you talk a little bit about that film, The Capsule? Like, just tell the audience, tell us what it's about, where the idea came from.
Yeah, it was a commission for installation by an arts collector.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I could do anything I wanted, which was great for a change. And it was part of a project called the Deste Foundation fashion collection, where basically every artist who would do that year's edition, and there were poets and musicians and photographers. I was the filmmaker of the group, and we had to basically have 5 pieces of fashion that were sculptural, that could remain as pieces of art within another piece of art.
Okay.
So I collaborated with some quite astonishing fashion designers, and I designed my first dress, which was the black dress with a collar, which to me was the quintessential symbol of disciplinary femininity in Greece, especially on that island, the island of Hydra, where we shot. So both, I consider Chevalier the sequel to Capsule. It's both films are about conforming to the fantasies of what our genders are. Conforming or not conforming, but being prisoners within that. Completely different genres, which is something that I think now I understand. Yeah, I'm really interested in genre from kind of like the left side, not head-on collisions with genre, but how do you approach genre in a way that doesn't put the dilemma of like mainstream, avant-garde, commercial, experimental, feeling that if you're going to make a film, you experiment anyway. So it really makes me really angry to hear that word experimental for cinema, that as if it's a category or a genre. Because I feel like we experiment, no matter what, we experiment with every single thing we do. And Chevalier also was the big moment of the crisis. And again, wrapping up to how I started, how do you speak about a reality that envelops you or attacks you without resorting to like a very direct didactic, or so sort of like try to do it in a way that's, I guess, more archetypal rather than TV realism. Or what we call, the kitchen sink film or something like that. So every time with every film, I'm trying to find this language, this new way. This was all about patriarchy taking over not just Greece, and a bunch of men, humans. It could have been women performing power. So in both films, the performance of power is something that I'm extremely interested in, since Fit, because it was the performance of the power of our senses, and what kind of imprint our senses leave on this very short passage that we have through this world.
It's noticeable in both those films as well. You create sort of these hothouse environments. It's a boat in one, and it's a kind of institution, some kind of school. We're not sure what in the previous film. I mean, that must present challenges as well as. I mean, why do you do that? Is that to be able to focus? But it must also provide challenges as well in terms of, certainly on the boat, in terms of the actual shooting.
I think it gives me a level of control that I need, because these films are all about control. The next one, which is about losing control in all ways possible, it's for the first time that I'm actually engaging the city. So we'll see how that works. I think it's, between Fit and Chevalier, I guess it was like a cycle of existences within confined spaces. That, very much like in a Greek tragedy where, there is a certain action, mostly through dialogue, that happens on the stage, and then most of the history and the big action happens outside of the stage. So, if you really see the way the films are structured, it's very much about that. I mean, you actually chose 2 scenes where basically, on those scenes, you find out everything you need to know about characters through this dialogue.
The one in Chevalier is incredible. I mean, they're like sort of like watching 2 animals, kind of like sussing each other out and kind of pressing.
And we watch westerns for that, because it was a western scene. And also these were recipes that were not in the script. There were other recipes, but each one of them felt extremely passionate about their recipe. So that's something that would never have worked so well if I didn't have all these afternoons where basically we're talking about our relationship to food, what it means, to be male, wanting to take over the kitchen, but then not really feeling entitled to, because there is also the other side of that within Greek society, which is equally matriarchal. So there's a lot of psychoanalysis that's going on through this. And in the casting also, it's very rare, almost never, that I actually ask them to read part of the script. It's just talking. And maybe a few improvs, like how someone crosses the room, and crossing the room just saying a joke or reciting the favorite food, or something that it's very down to earth and very simple to handle. And if someone cannot deliver something like that naturally, then you know that they're not going to be able to. Because actually I want naturalism within that very very controlling non-naturalism. So it's like two things that don't quite fit with each other, but
I think it's now time to invite our audience to ask some questions. Right, okay, there's the first hand there on the front row. Yeah.
So you said the images that are at the root of your films, I'm curious where those images come from, and if they have like sort of immediate semiotic meaning, or if that's something that you have to kind of like tease out progressively to connect to like the themes that you want to explore.
For the slow beats of going, it was again it was a loan from Beckett's Murphy, and he had his kind of rocking chair everywhere. That was his house, and that's one of my favorite books. So that was a huge how can you take a character from a literary character and you transpose it to cinema, but without making a adaptation, a direct adaptation for that. I wouldn't be able to afford the rights anyway, so, I tried to find this like one image that to me defines the film. So the woman with a rocking chair on her back, who is a nomad, but she needs, like a snail. She needs, and underneath her, she has like her portable record player because she loves music. And from that, I started creating this whole organization, the Global Nomad Project. I started realizing that all of my friends are from somewhere else and would all have to save money or work in order to go back to our countries and visit our families and our friends or our boyfriends, girlfriends. And then internet, it started coming through. So it's like a Frankenstein, where I start incorporating all the things that I want to throw them in the same pot and then see what happens out of this reaction. It's quite anarchic. Attenborough, which it looks so controlled. I wrote the script and when I actually write the script, it takes me very little time, because up until then I have had a notebook that has all of that stuff in there, just not in the script form. With all the music and everything that I want to create this universe. With Attenborough, it was the women kissing, and then I had to find out who was Marina and who was Bella. It was my fear of losing my dad, and getting to tell him all the stuff that I couldn't tell him. That's when art imitates. Actually, life imitates art, because 3 years later he was gone. And I managed to, through that film, because I couldn't talk to him, I managed to tell him everything. And at the same time, it was very important to me to speak a little bit about the way I grew up in the same town as these girls are now in this ghost town, in the end of that vision that my father had, my father's generation had. So you take something, Chevalier was very much, the first image that I had was, I didn't know what it was. I knew I wanted to do something about humans, like sort of like eating each other's guts, but like in a very civilized way. And I didn't know whether it was going to be men or women, actually. And then I thought sailboat, and then somehow I felt like I want to work with just men, just to see also, how I would do with that. In a country that's supposedly very patriarchal, and there is all this like gender issues, and none of that was true on my set. So sometimes I do things that are to just go through a completely new process and see what kind of film will come out of that. The first image was those little things, those little bobbing black things that I didn't know whether they were trash or fish or little extraterrestrials who were just coming out against that beach that was idyllic, but then there was this huge rock that was blocking everything. And then it took us a few months to find that beach. But because I couldn't afford anything else, so I had the boat, and then I had that beach, and that was it. And then I had the movie. Sometimes you also have to adjust all of your ideas based on what means you have. I knew exactly what means we had, and part of when Efthymis and I started writing the script, it was not on a boat, but then we knew that from our executive producer we could get a boat, and then that changed, and then that became much more interesting.
Okay, another question? Yeah, I can see a woman there, yeah.
I was just wondering about the use of sound in your films. Like, it was very striking in some of those clips, and just sort of when you start to think about sound as you're creating the film, and also how sound works into the story you're trying to create.
Mm-hmm. There's a script which, actually no, first there is a mess of notes everywhere, like notebooks on the notes of iPhone, which I encourage you to use because you have access like without being offline, without being online. My next script is actually in here, like tons of notes, because I like very much chaos in that process. I don't like being. It drives my two co-writers right now crazy, but out of this, there's lots of things that come out. And sound, actually, equally, there's like notes on sound for scenes as dialogue, because I consider them the same. I noticed, I had forgotten about that in The Slow Abuse of Going. Every time Petra was tapping, there was like a typewriter sound. And now I remember that I realized that I put that there because during those 6 months I was suffering from writer's block, where I couldn't write, and I actually have a bit of this sickness. So it was important to me that she was, every time she would step, it's as if she was writing this invisible script on the ground, on the grounds of these hotels. So in the shooting script, in the beginning everything is completely chaotic. There's an order that only I can understand, but because I'm also a producer, and also I want, when my actors start rehearsing, I want them to really understand everything. The chaos stops completely. I become, the opposite, completely the opposite, and that my shooting scripts have full dialogue, full sound, so that my sound designer, who I've been working with for a long time now, he's one of my angels, he knows exactly how to start. And then, Matt Johnson, who has been my editor for 20 years, he always, by having this script in the end, he knows exactly what, how to work with, not just with image, but also doing the sound editing.
Yeah, another question?
And something else, because you're young filmmakers, and this is a huge deal, music. I usually include music. The songs are part of my script, which is extremely important for your producers to know that you're gonna die if you don't have that song, and then they need to research and find out if you can have this song, and if you can't, at least you decide it before, way before you commit suicide, in the editing room.
Yeah, there's two here. Do you want to go first, and then you next? Yeah. Could you wait for the microphone, please? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers.
So, when you look for collaborators, how do you understand that this is the person you want to work with? Like, what traits of character are the most important ones for you?
It was much more difficult in the beginning. There was lots of trial and error. So lots of relationships that didn't go very well. But that happens. You're not really. You don't necessarily have to be friends with the people you work with. It's easier when you're not. I usually look for people who are as obsessed as I am with cinema. So it's not so much the skill, because the skill is something that we develop together. Matt Johnson, who is my, collaborator in everything, and we have our company together. We met in film school in Austin. He knew zero of the films that I liked, and I knew zero of the films that he liked. And we spent the first 6 months just basically fighting with each other, you know, but he's the one who completely transmitted the love for Screwball. You know, having grown up in Greece, like, I didn't know Screwball, and now it's something, and then I realized that Screwball, very much so, you know, in the like very fast, distantiated delivery, was very much like ancient Greek comedy, you know. So then I started seeing this, and then he became. He also introduced me to Robert Altman, you know, who is one of my other hugest heroes, and I introduced him to, let's say, Godard, and Antonioni, and anyway, you know. So I like to learn a lot. So I try to collaborate with people who have things to teach me, and who also like to learn. You know, so it's a both ways thing. With people who I like to talk with, you know, just to spend hours just shooting the shit, and I will never be bored. And then if that happens, then it's such a pleasure working with each other that the skill develops.
Thank you.
Hello. So my question is there a particular set of skills that you think is key when rehearsing with your actors, and how much time do you spend rehearsing with them? I spend months, even for Fit, you know, for the short film. I spent, you know, quite a few days before we spent, I think overall it was like 12 hours of shooting that film. But at the same time, I cannot say, you know, you have to rehearse, because sometimes the circumstances are not proper. You can't. But I should say it, I never work with actors who don't give me that time. Even if it's just talking, you know, even if it's Skyping, if, you know, some kind of talk, deep talk about the character, or about themselves, or about myself, because it's really a relationship, you know. It's as if you get engaged to be married to someone, and you have to, yeah, you have to be inspired and to be inspiring. And when I rehearse, I speak very little, and I just listen. And maybe I can say, okay, maybe if you do now, just switch this, just like 30 degrees. Oh, I speak a lot with geometry, like 20 degrees off, 80 degrees, a little bit back, a little bit, I don't know, you know, especially, I cannot, it's like a code that I develop with them. But I never tell them what to do. Never. And I never say the lines. In fact, when I get to, this is an ongoing joke with my assistant director, who I've been working with also for a long time. And by the time we started the shooting, we're actually, you know, people think that because I rehearse so much and because there's all these off things in my films that they happen on the set. But actually, no. Because when we go on the set, everything is absolutely set. Completely. There is zero space for improvisation because I have zero budget to do that. And also I work with people who, you know, they need to, you know, jump in their cars or jump on the metro and go to perform theater in the evening. And then, or if it's morning, they come from having shot for television, because Greek actors are extremely hardworking in order to be able to make a living. So I have to be extremely respectful of their time. So yeah, there is tons of improvisation, tons of uncontrolling, you know, where they basically claim their characters in rehearsal without me. Oh yeah, so by the time we actually on the set, I have forgotten my script. So I actually have to have my assistant director saying the lines, and those lines are new suddenly. You know, because I'm not, when we improvise and when we rehearse, I don't actually listen to the lines. I just listen to their voices and look at their body language. So when actually the dialogue is there, I'm so excited because it's new to me, you know. So I'm like re-pumped. It's like, okay, you know what I mean?
Yep. And another question, please.
Yeah. How do you convey sort of your surreal ideas to the rest of your crew? Because obviously you say that you've worked with, you know, a lot of your crew consistently, but in terms of trying to unpack all of those wild ideas so that everyone is on the same page with the more obscure ideas?
I guess I never consider any of my ideas obscure. So I just present them in a very matter-of-fact way, and they're always on a script form. And also, I spend, you know, 90% of my time making a film is doing all the research. And when I say research, is coming up with all the layers and the references. You know, why are we shooting there? What are the references? Why are the people, or why are the characters wearing these clothes? You know, I have a whole, you know, book that has all the references for everything, for space, for the, you know, for this, why is it like this? I'm also known as a very huge control freak on my set, so I have done my homework. And I am, because I come more from, you know, I start more from like visual and not from writing. I think more as a visual artist. So what's in the frame is something that is thoroughly investigated. But to me, it all makes sense in the end. That's why it's important to be very prepared. I never thought that you know, those dances on Attenberg were surreal. You know, to me, that was the only way that these two girls would communicate to these invisible neighbors that they were freaks, and they were loving being freaks. Instead of sitting, you know, in a cafe and smoking and saying, "Man, I don't belong here. I feel so different. You know, I should just get out of here." Instead, you know, to me it made sense that they would do that. But at the same time, in order for them to do that, you know, I had spent myself like 15 years just watching every single Pina Bausch performance, and just, you know, British comedy, for example, huge influence. Buster Keaton, you know. So I basically take all of my heroes, all of my references, paintings, music. You know, I make a mixtape, 50 songs that my entire cast and crew, you know, they get it as a present, but at the same time, before they come to the set, they have been in an oral landscape, which is a preparation for them. Which is, you know, it's not just like going through the schedule and but it's more like inspiring. Yeah, our work as directors is to inspire, you know, to inspire the people, to inspire your crew, your team, so that they understand. And having said that, I never describe my characters, so it's strange, you know, because when they ask me questions like, "Who am I?" we never talk about backstories. It drives me crazy. In Chevalier, there was one actor who had never been in a movie before. He huge theater actor in Greece. He is a huge theater actor in Greece. Because I refuse to give him answers of who he is, because I really want him to find it himself. The first week we were rehearsing on the boat, he told my AD that he had dreams that he was killing me in 10 different ways. And he wanted to quit. And then I had to, and he didn't, and then in the end he was phenomenal and he really enjoyed the process. I guess because the process is so important to me, I don't want to spoon feed it. And also, I want to be excited and I want to be surprised. And I also don't think necessarily that the ideas that are on my script are the best. And each one of them can bring so much.
Okay. Anybody else would like to ask Athina a question? No?
All questions answered.
Yeah.
You can ask a crazy question.
Yeah. No hands, no? Okay.
Hey, Renee.
Is the one there? Oh, yeah, okay.
No,
Oh, no, sorry.
She's actually one of my ex-students.
Ah, well, there's one here in the man here in the middle. Yeah, thanks.
Hey, so I see most of these films are part of your expression, like you have already mentioned, right? Is it something that a transition you would look like to go towards, let's say, commercial, mainstream cinema or films? Or is it like what you feel is that, okay, my expression or the content which I want to say, that is something I need to be more focused on? How you see yourself as a journey in that direction, or where are you, or where do you see yourself now?
I don't really see a distinction, as I said, between experiments and the mainstream. I saw the newest Star Wars and I thought it was like a great experiment in a series that has lasted for decades, and it had stopped experimenting. And I was so excited by that. I finally understood Star Wars. Yeah, I'm not sure. That the next film is a film that's very different. I guess because I deal with space in a different way. It has a female in my head. She's an action hero. So to me, this is my female action hero movie. But I guess if a studio talked to me about that, they probably wouldn't think that after listening to my pitch. But to me, it's extremely important to keep trying things out outside of the box. And sometimes you find yourself inside the box by doing this, but in the best way possible. I never thought I was going to do the opening ceremony of the biggest spectacle in the world, but I did it entirely on my terms. So the only thing I'm going to say is hopefully I'm going to keep making movies, although it's not for sure. And hopefully I'm going to keep making them on my terms. That's the important thing to me. And also, I never rush. And if I have one thing to tell you, it's like, everyone says, what have you done in the last year, the last 2 years, the last 3 years, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I mean, 2 of my favorite films in this millennium, maybe my 2 favorite films. Are they my 2 favorite? Okay, 2 of my 4 favorites are films that took 8 and 9 years to be made. Zama by Lucrezia Martel. It's a historic epic, and it's a scandal for the way she made it. But it advances cinema. and it was, you know, it took her a long time. Or Tony Erdmann by Marinade, you know, two female filmmakers who took their time, researched like hell. No, it's not lazy cinema. That's what I feel, and I am in complete admiration of not lazy cinema.
What are the other two films?
Excuse me?
What are the other two favourite films?
They keep changing, you know. So these are the constants, and the other keep changing. So
okay, you won't go there. Don't want to go there. Okay, the other side to wrap up. One more question, maybe, before we. Yeah, is anybody there? No. Yeah, one question just over there. Oh, so was the one.
Oh, suddenly there's more. Hey?
Oh, there's okay. So we've got one here and then one there. But I'm pretty sure we can fit both in. Yeah.
How do you think also being a producer helps how you direct your films?
Enormously. Because I mean, I learned so much by producing Yorgos's films, and he taught me a lot how to be a better producer because he was a great director. So I think it's important, especially when we start, to not be afraid of that. You know, even if you're not the primary producer, you know, try to find out how your film is being made. You know, how the budget is being spent, how the decisions are being made, how the crew is being hired, because ultimately all these are elements that you will have right around you, and they could ruin your film. You know, it takes for Chevalier, because we're going to be on this boat for a month, a little bit more than a month. I cast every single crew member. You know, because basically we were all going to perform on that boat, and if we had one asshole, you know, boy or girl, I knew that was going to ruin. And it was like a church, seriously. Like, I can't believe how I did good casting, you know, so I was proud of that. Because everyone loved each other. You know, even if they didn't, everyone loved each other.
Okay, and there's one final question, just there. Yep.
Hi, I was just wanting to know how you kind of faced the challenge of, with your budget being so low, kind of looking at paying actors and crew, and whether or not you do that, and actually what that challenge is if you aren't able to pay that.
Yeah, it's, you know, in the Slow Beast of Going, it was completely different. So, you know, we were students. It was through grants. And I felt absolutely fine with that. I mean, there is this lack of guilt in American independent film, exactly because there is no state to come and support anything, and those grants are basically so minuscule that there is a great development of camaraderie and a work ethic that does not rely on money, which is, I was completely blown away when I came back to Europe and I saw that, you know, people expected lots of money, you know, like in Greece back then, you know, beginning of the noughts, like 50,000 for a short film. Like when I had made The Slow Beast of Going for $30,000 with grants, and, you know, just by, you know, doing everything I can to get support. So that's when I you know, when Yorgos asked me to produce his basically first feature, you know, he asked me because at that point we were talking a lot about how films were being made, you know, first or second films, you know, with friends and with borrowed equipment and all locations that you know, and switching between producer and director and maybe cinematographer and caterer and all of that. For my last 3 films, Capsule was amazing. You know, I never had so much money because it was a commission. by someone who really appreciated the craft. And with Atterberger Chevalier, it was difficult, extremely difficult, but everyone was paid. Just not as much. You know, you'll be surprised when you hear what we get. And also, it's very rare in Greece, producers and directors of, you know, from my generation onward, because right now we have lots of great young producers of your generation. You know, there are films that are being tailored according to the budgets that we have. So if, let me just tell you that, let's say, you know, like a really big director, if let's say Yorgos wanted to come back to Greece to make a movie, there is a limitation for how much the Greek Film Center can give, and I'm too embarrassed to say how much is that, but that would probably cover a short UK film. So we have to figure out ways. In my case, I have my producer, Maria Hadjakou, who we're having our company together, and Matt Johnson. So we're a team, and we try to figure out. And then I have an executive producer, Christos Konstantakopoulos, who is always, because he believes in Greek cinema, and I'm not the only one. This is the case of someone who basically has come to support Greek cinema wherever he can, because the state cannot. So this is something that you as your own producers can do, you know, find people who are voracious cinephiles, or they love cinema, or they, for some reason, you know, crowdfunding is great for that. When we made Kineta and Alps, we did crowdfunding before crowdfunding existed. You know, it would have been much easier if it was online, but we actually, you know, went to tons of people, and just because we believed that these movies had to be made, we were supported.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that's where we have to end, but it's been an incredibly interesting masterclass. Please join me in thanking Athina.
And thank you very much. Thanks to you. Thanks to Karen so much for the hospitality and the great questions and the homework.
Yes.
And to Chloe Turner, our programmer, and the BFI and cinema.